This episode is brought to you by Performance Protocol. You all know I've been preaching about recruiting and development of our police teams. Many agencies across the country are still struggling with their numbers, which impacts everyone's wellness and true ability to do their jobs. Enter Performance Protocol, a premier solution to address these exact challenges, helping not only to get your agency fully staffed, but stay fully staffed. To learn more, go to performance-protocol.com.
Leadership is leadership. I don't care where you learned it, don't care where you practiced it. That leadership is about people and trust. You can lead any organization.
We minimize any employee to me too much when we funnel them through, we put them in a box, and we almost keep them in the box to do this work.
And a lot of times I've seen those sergeants and corporals, those first lines, be so protective and really put it out for their people, but to the detriment of their people because they don't build any bridges with other groups, right? And that's where you get that silo. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric, and we have another leadership panel. I'm excited to share these foundational leaders in their own industries, and they're both super active in the fake retired life, as I like to call it, continuing to share their leadership insights for the profession. And I think that that's such a powerful thing. I'm really excited to share them both with you in our conversation today. First off, I want to reintroduce a returning guest. That is Jonni Redick. I've promised to call her Johnny in the past, not ma'am or retired assistant chief. So, Johnny, if we could start with you, if you could give us a brief introduction if people haven't listened to the prior episode. And after this, please look up and listen to the prior episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of make it brief, first of all, thank you, Eric. Always enjoy being a part of these conversations because what you do is so needed and we don't do it enough. It creates a great space for, I believe, like honesty and vulnerability and also creativity. So for me, I retired after 29 years with the California Highway Patrol. I retired as an assistant chief. And this is my 7th year being retired. And after I retired, I didn't really want to completely be done contributing just to the world in general. I wanted to still offer my gifts and talents. And so I went back and continued my education. And as I continued my education, I got a job offer to actually be an adjunct professor at the University of San Diego, where I teach our law enforcement and public safety leadership course. And then I teach also locally at our junior college. And if that wasn't enough, I decided, well, what about some consulting? So I do a little of that. And I had a book in me for almost 2 decades. So I decided to write that book, which was my memoir. And then I also put together a promotional preparation book for law enforcement because it was always such a struggle for me going through that pathway. But those are kind of the things that I'm doing in retirement. And along with that, I am a Gigi of 2 grandsons. So I do find family time too. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that you ended with the Gigi. I think that's the most important job you hold now. But thank you for sharing all your insights. And look at that. Got the memoir.
Yes,
so
thank you. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate that and everything that you put out and where we got connected initially on a recruiting hiring seminar for Police One Lexipol was really just trying to share that insight. And that's really what I can tell you're so much about. You're a professor. You've written literally to help people through similar situations. And that's what we're talking about here today, right? Leadership is leadership. I want to introduce our new guest. So that's Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCullouch, or Oak. I've promised to call him Oak today. So LTC, can you take it off and introduce yourself, please?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I know we've talked about this for a while, so I've really been looking forward to it. So I did 23 years in the Army, combat arms officer, infantry and armor. And my last assignment, I ran an Army ROTC program at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. So like you, Johnny, in the teaching realm there. and loved it. And that was probably one of my favorite jobs in the Army. Retired from the Army 2009, ran a food bank for a couple years, a very large food bank, covered 52 counties along the Gulf Coast, over 3 states. So the whole Gulf Coast of Mississippi, the whole Gulf Coast of Alabama, and about a third of the panhandle of Florida. And took over that job about a month before the BP oil spill. So I was a little busy during that period. And then they offered me to come here to Daytona Beach, Florida, and it's tough to live in Daytona, but somebody has to do it.
Yeah,
so
I appreciate your service. Thank you.
Yeah, I took one for the team and moved here to Daytona, and I've been here for 13 years. Came here and was the recruiter for the Army ROTC program here at Embry-Riddle as a Department of the Army civilian. And I retired from my day job. I wrote my book, published it February 2021. And then I retired in October 2021, retired last October, so 2023. And now all I do is I go out and speak about leadership and do a little bit of coaching and consulting like Jonni as well, but mainly keynote talks. And I too, I tell everybody that wants to listen, the only thing better than being a father is that being a grandfather. So I've got a soon to be 11-year-old granddaughter, 7-year-old grandson, and a 3-year-old grandson. And they call me Papa Dude. That's me.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you for sharing that, Oak and Jonni. We're just gonna roll with it because we could keep talking and go off script, and we could probably talk about leadership for hours and hours, maybe even days, if we're properly hydrated. But the first prompt I just want to throw at you is: we have a lot of really positive, constructive people in our industries and our agencies, people that are trying to make positive change and get traction. That's a lot of who listens in and tunes in to develop themselves and their team. However, we know that we also have a lot of corrosive energy. It's just organizational stuff. It's not just law enforcement or military. It is everything. But I want to throw that prompt at you. How do we and how have you kind of mobilized your energy to try to curb that negative or toxic or corrosive energy into positive momentum?
Yeah, and I'm really kind of lucky in that somebody asked me, so what's your niche? Who do you like to talk to? And my answer is anybody who is or wants to be a leader. I don't care. Because like Eric said at the beginning here, leadership is leadership. I don't care where you learned it. Don't care where you practiced it. If you know that leadership is about people and trust, you can lead any organization. And I think that's one of the keys to this, Eric, is trust. And I think that that we have a lack of trust in this country to a level that I have never seen, and we got to fix that, because you can't have an organization that isn't based on trust, and so I think we got to get back to as a leader, you have to make an effort to build that trust in your organization. And when I talk about trust, I talk about 360-degree trust, because I think all of us, everybody can agree that the biggest part of trust, and whatever most people think about trust in an organization, is that the people you lead have to trust you as the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's number one. If you don't have that one, it doesn't matter what else we do. But then the leader also has to trust the people that they're leading. And then everybody in that organization has to trust everybody else that they're going to do the right thing and do their job. And then take it one step further in the law enforcement, which I speak to a lot of law enforcement associations and conferences. Now you got to build that trust with the people that you serve. And if any part of that 360-degree trust is broken, then you got a problem. And I see a lot of it broken here in this society today. And I think part of it is this, we're all human. We all are different. We all have our own opinions. We all have all those things. But I think part of the problem that we're having right now is that we focus on those things that we have different instead of focusing on what we have in common. Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to fix something, you can't fix it by starting with what you have different. You'll never get there. You start with what you have in common, and then you work your way out from there. And that's how you can then Eventually, again, we're never going to get everybody to agree 100%, but maybe we can get people to at least compromise, come to a compromise somewhere in the middle that helps everybody. And I think we got to get back to that, because until we do, we're not going to fix it.
I mean, that's huge. Is finding that common ground. A lot of times, the leadership concepts aren't crazy. It's taking them and then applying them with all the personalities and the complications.
Yeah.
That's where it gets a little hairy. But I think when we focus on basics, what I heard there is building trust, right? Start with trust. And for me, in my experience, what I've seen, you got to start small. And a lot of us are super motivated, but we have to realize that things don't change overnight, just like they didn't get here to this place of distrust or mistrust overnight either, right? So it's just starting small, accepting and recognizing the small wins. And for me, it's demonstrating trust. And I try to visualize it where maybe I have to demonstrate 10 times what I expect to see back, but at least for me and a lot of people that I look up to, a lot of people whose brains I've picked on this show and otherwise have said that that works, right? There's no secret sauce, but it takes a lot of time, and we all know the adage that it can take so much time to build trust, and then it takes like a microsecond to dissolve it all, right? With that misstep or when you're off. So demonstrate trust and assume good intent of your people. And I love that 360 aspect, right? I think a lot of times we don't think upward, right? We think about who's in our control. So a sergeant or a corporal, right? Looking at your little crew. And a lot of times I've seen those sergeants and corporals, those first lines, be so protective and really put it out for their people, but to the detriment of their people because they don't build any bridges with other groups, right? And that's where you get that silo, that it feels safe. But my challenge to those folks is that you're not moving them to where they need to go, and you're really stalling the organization, right? Because I think, as you said, with finding that commonality, you're actually destroying that ability to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think, in the Army, we used to have this, are you an influencer outside your sphere, outside your little group? And you really got to try to do that, because that's huge. I mean, because that's what builds that trust and that relationship with other people and other organizations. And again, I think, a whole nother topic about micromanaging and fear of failure and all those things. I think that's kind of drawn people into only that tight knit group of people, and they're not willing to move outside that.
Yeah, for sure. Jonni, what do you got?
Absolutely. Trust is a center pillar, so to speak, for how we want to approach a toxic or corrosive environment or culture. And I like the 360-degree approach. I just think that sometimes when we're really looking at how to build trust, we don't know how to build trust. We know how to say we need to build trust, but we practically don't know how to apply our behavior and our consistency to trust building things that matter to the people that we are really serving inside of our organizations. And that's all. This is every classification. And I hate when we kind of dissect and we leave out professional staff. We leave out the custodians. We leave out our entire body of people. So, for example, on the California Highway Patrol, we embarked on a public trust campaign, and it was externally focused initially until we started doing the work to put together the training internally and discovered we had a big internal trust issue that we didn't really realize had emerged so significantly. But we had a couple of incidents statewide. We had an increase in misconduct cases. We had some executives at the highest level doing things they shouldn't have, and those came out and hit the news and all these kinds of things. And so what we realized to build trust was that we had to be vulnerable. We had to step into the arena in those trainings and take the hit when they were like, well, how come it's a double standard if this happens up there, but when we do it down here, we have to, the investigation looks like this, and where's the support that we need? And it was just a space to have humility as a leader, to not be defensive. Because if we really wanted to create the trust silos that we're always talking about, we have to get dirty. We have to get messy. We have to be like, yeah, we screwed that up. We didn't do very well. And how can we do better? And how can we do better together? And so we realized in that internal trust campaign that there was a lot of things that we were esoterically going to be working on and doing. But when we started that training and those first questions came, it was like, I'm an assistant chief and I'm in these and I facilitate to kick it off. But then you have, captains and lieutenants kind of managing the conversation. And it's all classifications that's in this training. We didn't do it by rank and we didn't do it by uniform and non-uniform. And so vulnerability and humility are really important when we're making mistakes and we're not getting it right. But we don't have to funnel that through the chain. We can be the ones that show up and actually say that out of our mouth to say, man, we really messed this up, because we're modeling to our frontline supervisors, our middle managers, that it's human for us to make mistakes and we need to admit and own those mistakes. Because when our people see us like themselves, then that trust relationship changes. And so I just feel like those really matter on like building trust. Like what do you do to build trust? I believe there's strategies and exercises and all of these things, but in the practical daily, when I show up, how do I build trust with my people as a whole, as a team, but individually for them, so that they have trust to know that I'm going to show up. And when I do, I'm going to have integrity in my leadership. And yes, I'm going to have accountability, but I'm also going to have support for you. And my best interest is always you. And yes, after that is the community and the public we serve. But if I don't take care of my people and I don't take care of them when I'm holding them accountable, I'm not covering up for them. I want to do it in a way that protects them from themselves, 'cause sometimes they don't know what they don't know. But I also want to develop them in their own understanding of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard a lot of things there, and I'm just going to process it a little bit. So when we think about the nitty gritty of what does that look like, right? What does that look like to build and demonstrate trust and receive it back? It's showing up, and I hear that, right? It's like you have command, we have executives going to the same training, and then also being vulnerable, just leveling with people. And I think that's such a basic thing when you humanize yourself, and that's through accepting and sharing mistakes. And that's what we're talking about here, right? Like, you don't just
But it's
know
hard to
leadership.
do.
No one's, yeah,
It's hard to
it
do. We
is.
are prideful, egotistical, especially when you rise in rank. You know it and you want to say it, but you don't want to go to the depth of like, man, I missed that one. I totally missed the mark. We usually go, okay, we got
Yeah.
that wrong. We need to do it right. Let's do, versus the feeling part of like, man, I blew
Yeah,
that.
well, you're exactly right, Johnny. And I think, we all have egos. Anybody who tells you they don't have an ego is lying to you.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
mm-hmm.
We all have an ego. And we want people to have an ego because that's what drives people to be successful. That's what drives people to be the best at what they do. But good leaders know when to put that ego aside and own the responsibility. And I think that's part of the problem that we have in leadership today, in the world, in every profession, in every country, is I don't see senior leaders taking responsibility for their organizations. What I see today is leaders saying, picking and choosing what they want to be responsible for. Sorry, that's not leadership. You own everything inside your organization. Everything that does or doesn't happen falls on you.
Can't it just be the good stuff? Can it just be
Yeah,
when
you
stuff
can't
goes
say, well, that
well and
went
then,
really well, so I'm going to take credit for that. But that
yeah.
didn't go so well, so I'm going to blame Eric for that. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
that's not leadership.
Yeah.
And part of that, like you said, how do we actually build that trust? And I had a boss who retired, I think, 3-star general, who was a great mentor of mine. And he told me one day, he said, Oak, I don't care how high up in the organization you get, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said 2 things happen when you do that. Number 1, you show that you're no better than they are. You got to get your own cup just like they do. And number 2, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get from your office to the coffee pot and back to your office. And along the way, you stop and talk to people where they work. Because I'm a firm believer, as he was, that if you want trust, people got to know you and you got to know them. because nobody's going to
It's
trust you if they don't
relational.
know you. I'm sorry, that's human nature. If I don't know you, I'm not going to trust you. And so the number one advice, I've had my hand in commissioning over 600 lieutenants over my career in the Army. And the number one thing I used to tell them as they were getting close to being commissioned, I said, your goal should be every day go out and find one person in your organization and find out one new thing about that person. Every day, one person, one thing. And I said, and preferably not about the job. You'll figure that piece out. Find out what their spouse's name is, what their kids' names are, what sports do their kids play, what's their hobby, what do they like, what they don't like. And like you said, Jonni, you got to keep that leader-led relationship. I got it. That doesn't mean that you can't get to know them. And the hard part for leaders is if you want to get to know them, then you got to open up a little bit and let them get to know you. And that's where I see a lot of
Absolutely.
leaders falling.
I think it goes back to that safety, right? And I've heard senior leaders say things like, "The guys don't want me around," and I think that's a point of fear and it's a point of
Yeah.
safety, security. But if you assume that, then you're going to manifest it, right? So like,
Yeah.
you don't show up because you don't want to be in their space, but maybe that was how you remember it as an officer. But I think if we really challenge ourselves back to when we were new, we didn't want that. We just accepted that. Maybe that was normal, but I I feel like maybe you have thoughts on this, but there's a lot of conversation over leading the new generation, and they got to be checked in on, they got to know why, and I think there's a lot of reasons to that with just how this generation has grown up, including mine, kind of being the prezy, the old millennial as I call myself. But I do notice, and tell me if you know otherwise, but people always want to know why. They always want to be checked in on. It's just become more okay to ask for it or expect it in your workplace, especially outside of the traditional uniform jobs. But I have a lot of Gen Xers that work under me, under my command, under my supervision. They want to know why all the time, and they're very vocal about it. So
Yeah.
for me, it's not necessarily a generational desire. It's just maybe more of what we see as a trend.
When I was a young lieutenant, I never asked the question why. Does that mean I never wondered why? I
Right,
absolutely
right.
did.
Mm-hmm.
This generation wants to know why, and they're going to ask you why. And there's nothing wrong with that. It took a couple years for this old man to figure out that there was nothing wrong with that. But what I have figured out now is that if you can tell them the why, you got them. They'll do anything you want them to do, but they want to know why. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's not. So you made me actually think about my 27-year-old daughter. And when we have conversations, she often comes to me about things she's experiencing in her work environment. And I was just thinking, like this communication part on checking in. I notice, and it's not like a broad brush. It's just in some situations with my son is a millennial, so he's 32. And my daughter is 27, so she's at this tail end between the two spaces, that these check-ins are really important for their mental health. So not only am I imparting wisdom and helping her navigate things in her career that may be technical, or conversations with her bosses or peers when she feels like she's been treated a certain kind of way, but I realize the check-ins are really important for her mental health because, our young people want to know that they're valued. They
Mm-hmm.
want to know that if I went to 4 years of college or even have my master's degree, how is that valuable to you in this organization if you never ask me about any of that, if I never get to really apply it per se. So like, when we're talking about these why situations, they're just wanting to offer their knowledge, right? Their education. They do come with some level of experience. It may not be exactly policing experience, but it's life experience, it's school experience, it's other job experience. And I think we minimize them. We minimize any employee to me too much when we funnel them through the recruitment into an academy. We put them in a box and we almost keep them in the box to do this work. And that's all we really want out of them. But yet we say we want all of these things, but we don't allow them the space to have artistry and creativity, innovation, and to share things that may not be aligned with me because I'm in my own box because of my own conditioning for however long. But if I'm a leader that says I'm open to things, then I should have a think tank of people that don't agree with me. They're generationally different, they're classificationally different, they are culturally different, and I should be hearing from them so that I can not only improve the service outward, but I can also improve the service inward to all of our people that we work for. And also, they can be better together. And I just think we limit generationally and place people in these boxes. And man, we're missing the mark.
I had another boss who retired, a 3 or 4-star general, and he used to tell me, Oak, a good idea is a good idea, whether it comes from a private or a general. And a bad idea is a bad idea, whether it comes from a private or a general. And his point was, open it up and let people give you some ideas, because you don't have all the answers. I'm sorry, I don't care how long you've been doing what you're doing. If you think you got all the answers, go do something else, please. You will be amazed at what some of these young men and women come up with as an idea. And part of it is exactly what you're saying, Johnny, is that because we have grown up in this culture and in this very structured system, we think a certain way, we see things a certain way, and you bring somebody from the outside in, these young people who are just starting, they're looking at things with a whole fresh set of eyes from a different vantage point. And so you're going to get some ideas outside the box. Whereas if you're looking, and I always use this when I'm talking about mentorship, because I was at a police conference, by the way, and I said, you got to have a mentor. I don't care if you got to have a mentor, you got to be a mentor. And one of the police chiefs screamed from the back of the room, I'm the police chief. Who can I pick as a mentor? And I said, really? I said, and more importantly, go find somebody outside the police force to be for you, because everybody in here is looking at things like this. Go find somebody outside your profession, and you'll find all kinds of new, innovative ways to do things.
Yeah.
But we're afraid to do that. And as leaders, sometimes, like you said, Johnny, we're afraid to let the young guys and gals come up with some ideas.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very fortunate. As you know, I had our backgrounds in recruitment, I had our community outreach on top of all my commands. I had those special teams, and those are folks that we bring in, right? That are a little bit younger. They gonna go and do the preparation programs. They're gonna keep all the energy. And we would have our statewide meetings with all of our recruitment and our teams. And I just say it keeps you so relevant. It keeps you so contemporary to stay engaged that way, and lean in. And but I just want to reemphasize the correlation to trust, to this space of value for not just inspiring more work, but their mental health. They really, for the retention part of it, but also the health of that retention for them is really how we connect, building that trust and what that trust building looks like, to embrace the values that they bring and the value that they bring, so that they stay healthy.
And I think the other part of that is their goals in life, and I incorporated that in my quarterly counselings with when I got somebody new in. The first thing I did was I sat down and I did a counseling with them. This is the culture, this is our vision and our plan, whatever. And then I ended it with, where do you want to be in 5 years from now? So I don't even care if it's not in this organization. Where do you want to be? And they'd tell me, and I'd say, okay, well, let's map that out. If you want to be there in 5 years, then what are the things we have to do? What training do I have to get you to? What education do I have to send you for? What experiences do we need to get you so that in 5 years you're where you want to be? Yeah. And we actually wrote it out. And every quarterly counseling, I'd pull that out and I'd say, okay, where are we? What have we done? What do we still need to do? They realized that they weren't just a person to get a job done. I actually cared about where they were going
Yeah.
to go.
Not just a cog, right? It's a person. And that's where I love
They're
all these topics. They're all really intersecting around this people-centric approach. And that's where we went really early on in the episode, just identifying leadership's about taking care of people. I mean, so many times I hear a frustrated supervisor or quote unquote leader say, like, how do we make them do this? How do we get them to do this? And it's like, well, that's not leadership. That's management or even coercion, right? That's just
yeah,
respecting and listening to the rank just because you have to, right? Like for me, leadership is people doing things because they want to rather than because they have to. But especially with this rank structure and uniform personnel that we're talking about, our cultures that we know intimately, that is a thing. And it just makes me recognize and want to highlight the need to be intentional about these things, right? It's sure we could talk about building trust, we could talk about innovation, we could talk about showing up and checking in, and also recognizing our people as individuals, as meaningful resources and people with values and their own personal value. But then we kind of go back into how things are or how we've seen it demonstrated, and not because of malintention most of the time. It's just because that's how things are. So that's how we visualize them. But I love the example of recruiting, and that's where me and Jonni connected initially. But for me, my recruiter was like fantastic. I wouldn't have had it. I wouldn't have had the success without my team or the trust from above, right? So I was a little front loaded with that amount of trust. But when people would pitch either from above, below, or laterally, hey, I saw this this recruiting training, this police recruiting seminar, I was almost immediately everything. I was like, I don't want to go to it. They're like, why? I'm like, because it's what all the cops are going to go to and what they're all talking about. We got to do something else. Like, I want to see what private sector's doing. I want to look at LinkedIn or Indeed on articles and just talk about branding, not just police branding, but just like categorical marketing and branding. Let's just like start reading and listening to stuff about that, because it's all basic, but we try to overanalyze things sometimes, but really we just need to identify the problem. And a shout out to a local police leader who's now retired, but Commander Jeff Selig in the area, SWAT commander, neighboring agency, but he put on some leadership training and he really just helped recognize that the people closest to the problem are often closest to the solution, right? So we can,
absolutely.
yeah, we can be at our desks and we can have really great ideas because we have the experience and the time and we've seen how things work, how things don't work. But really, we're not doing the job every day that we want, X problem or X challenge fixed. But we do have people that are literally working on that project or working on that crime trend or working with that clunky logistical system. We could take our bird's eye view, or we could actually bring them in, and then also not just bring them in and hear their ideas, but do something with that and demonstrate that we're hearing and we're working with it, right? Let's
Yeah.
pick it apart together. Let's break it down. And I mean, that's one approach to looking at someone's career, but also an approach to the idea, because the quickest way to shut someone down is to ask for their feedback and then not appear to do anything with it too, right? So it's all a balance. But for me, like my biggest takeaway tying it all together is just intention and making sure we're recognizing our blind spots and we're stepping outside of that or continuing to ask questions. I think one more thing I want to recognize is that need to seek mentorship and continue to find mentorship, because if you think that there's no one that can mentor you, then that's the epitome of ego. And I don't even think that chief meant it in that way, probably. But it's just that recognition that we always have something to learn. And I think that if we're all going to be efficient and optimized, we have to always be the student. And we all have mentors. We really think about it in every walk. Like I have professional mentors, I have personal mentors, I have
Absolutely.
family driven kind of. They run their family in a way. They show up as a dad in a way that I want to emulate. They might not all be the same person. They may be living or dead, right? And these are all things that we can continue to learn from. So I just want to throw that out because it's such a thing that I really encourage people to continue to think about.
Yeah, I agree. Mentorship is huge, and not only for you to be a mentor, which is huge, but also to have a mentor. And you're right; it's in every aspect of your life. It if you allow it to be. And I will just tell you, I don't know anybody who is very successful who doesn't have mentors. even today, even I don't care how high up they get, they still have a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think about, I don't know necessarily your full audience, Eric. I know it's people coming to want to be developed. They want to, have ideas. They want to feel supported. And I'm hoping that there's leaders or even individuals who are in organizations to take ideas back. But when you look across law enforcement specifically, not very many law enforcement agencies have formal mentor programs.
Yeah.
And I'm blown away by that because I'm
Yeah.
like, that is probably like the most simplest thing that you could work with your HR department to actually implement, so that when somebody onboards into the organization, you feel really close to the recruiter, the background investigator, you feel really good, you get an FTO, field training officer, and then you're just released out. And then there's really no formalized mentorship for anybody to help them develop, their continued skill building, their knowledge building, for their career pathing, any of those things. I mean, Oak, what you talk about in the military just sounds very basic, but in law enforcement, some places don't even have annual appraisals. They don't have monthly or quarterly evaluations. They don't have leadership development plans. They don't have career pathing in this capacity. But if you just started something like a simple mentoring program, and say one-on-one mentoring isn't necessarily always the thing, and you could do communities of practice where you could build like this bigger, focal group for mentorship, right? Mentoring circles. They don't have to be traditionally what we think mentoring should look like, but it creates the ability for them to be mentored. And that's just creating that in a consistent way. And you'd be surprised when you do that. And I go back to the trust, where you're building trust in those relationships. You're, connecting that value for all of them. They're feeling seen, being seen. And then they're getting that support through the mentorship to guide them, for their moments and guide them for the moments to come.
Just about every profession I talk to out there, I ask that question: how many of you out here in your organization, how many do you have a professional development program? And you'd be shocked how many don't. And
I don't think we would be shocked. Sadly, that's because that's the thing.
Yeah, this is why I tell them why it's so important. First of all, I mean, how are you going to develop the younger people if you don't have a professional development program? And the analogy I always use: pick a sports team, whatever sport you like. Pick the team that is the best year in and year out. They're not the ones that go out and get the $20 million free agent. They're the ones who build it from the bottom up. So you got to do that. And I always tell them, here's the problem if you don't have a professional development program. If I join your program, I'm an 18-year-old kid, and I have aspirations to be a leader. And I join your organization, and you don't show me a pathway for me to get there, I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else that does. So you're going to lose your best people if you don't have a professional development program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's huge that you have to do that.
Yeah, I love that we've gone there, because I actually shout out to Jonni for sharing an invite for articles, for FBI LEDA, and that's what I wrote about, was development, because I kind of put this out of order, but I was going to prompt like, hey, what do you think the biggest thing facing law enforcement is, the biggest challenge? It's not recruiting, it's not retention, it's not wellness, it's not crime, it's development, right? And if we address development, we address all of those things. And so when we're bringing people in, or we're opening our doors to, come look at our agency, see what we can turn you into, see what you can be a part of, that's development. And we do it the right way. If we're developing our recruits, our applicants, our new officers, our new sergeants, I mean, that's what I'm spending my time at on my 9 to 5, or if you want to call it that, but is development, right? And I'm trying to hit it from multiple angles. In recruiting, I love the shout out to an officialized mentorship program. We went with the, hey, let's do it through recruiting and peer support, because me and my recruiter were in peer support. So we're gonna give you somebody, try to align interests in some life experience on paper at least, but at least you have somebody when you get hired and you go off to academy and you have no point of contact outside of your training sergeant that you generally, historically, don't really want contact, because that means something's going wrong. You just want to be sent off and you're like good to go. But you now have a mentor with some peer support, privilege protections, right? And then also teaching people, and this is where the officialized training for sergeants that I'm trying to work on is teaching our supervisors how to help people find their mentors, right? So that goes with the regular sit downs. We have, like most agencies, the 6 or 12-month evals, but if we're really gonna expect development, we have to push it. We have to drive it at a faster, more intentional pace. And so that's where, for me, monthly is probably a decent place to start. And that way you can say, hey, you have this goal that we sat down 3-4 months ago. Like, we're not just going to revisit in 2 months, but where are you at now? 3 weeks ago, you started here, and you set these really small steps so that you can actually make sure you're getting traction. And then the employee is seeing that progress, and they are feeling like they're valued and they're validated. So I love
So Eric,
everything you've put in.
Eric, in your agency, do you require ride-alongs with your sergeants to ride along with your officers?
We don't.
Yeah. So I'm just going to keep talking about the Highway Patrol. So CHP,
I love it, though.
that's something we've always done. We've required quarterly ride-alongs. Sergeants are to go out and ride with them.
I think she froze.
Yeah, we got Johnny frozen.
No, but and I think what you're talking about and what she's talking about is absolutely true. And I think in the Army, at least we used to. I've been out of the Army since 2009, so I'm not sure anymore. But when I was a young lieutenant or a captain, or when I was a young officer, every time I switched duty stations, which was every 2 years, they would assign me somebody when I got on post was my counterpart, somebody that I could then immediately connect with. And even before I came onto post, they were sending me messages saying, okay, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. And that was huge. And I think and that sounds like you're trying to do that now in your organization. I think you'll see a huge benefit from it, that people come in day one like they feel like they're part of the organization. They know somebody. And they've been able to ask questions about the new post or the new job or the new whatever's new to them. And if you don't have that, then you're fighting an uphill battle, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And fortunately, it's the whole team, like the whole leadership team, and that actually includes the followers, right? Like, they're part of the team that need to be, inspiring line level leadership as well. And so it's a recognition from my bosses above that, hey, this is a priority. It's one of the strategic pillars. We need to develop our people. So we're going back to that cohesion, right? That overlap that you talked about. So that's where the mission and purpose is so critical. We're not just here just spinning our wheels, going to 911 calls. We're not just here, developing this unit for nothing. No, there's like a reason for it. And I think that's where you find the overlap from the beginning of the episode. We're talking about just finding that common ground, and that's the foundation, the robust foundation that we build off of. And so it's recognition from my situation right now is the top has identified this necessary priority. We're all bought in, and then me and my colleagues are then building, okay, what does that look like? Let's work with our people. Let's identify what development metrics, what pace. Let's define some of these words. One of them is quality. Like, let's define what quality means when we're trying to develop our people for quality work. So it's like the first line supervisors getting that buy-in too. So yeah, absolutely. Johnny, welcome back.
I was talking, and
we
then
lost
all of
you
a sudden
there.
I was like, wait a minute, I'm being booted out. What's happening? My apologies.
No, you're good.
Well, I was
Do you
just
remember
saying
where
that
you're
Highway
at?
Patrol, we require quarterly ride-alongs by supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
And that just gives, supervisor that opportunity to go for a ride along, again, building that relationship, working on that trust, but also the opportunity to kind of lean in and maybe mentor, talk about career things, not just, critiquing them on the work for the day, right? And then it's written up, and it's written on their monthly evaluation about the ride along. We encourage our lieutenants to go out quarterly. We encourage the captain to go out quarterly. So I remember when I was an officer, I had a captain that came and he rode with every single one of us. And there was like 100 of us. But that was his intention, was to ride with all of us in his first, whatever 100-day plan that he had. So he modeled that for me. So as I promoted, I did ride-alongs with all my staff. That's just what I would do. And I was the captain. And then I came back and I would ride as an assistant chief, or I would come to all the training day things I didn't have to, because that's your opportunity to do all those things we do that we want to do if we don't have a formalized system to do them. But for the Highway Patrol, we kind of do
Mm-hmm.
have a formalized system for many things. The one thing that we don't really have, we have a mentor program, but it's not designed as effectively as it could be. And we don't have what I think we need is a coaching program that actually helps to coach our management and above for them. That's what I believe they need. I believe we all need that, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's my next thing is like the multi-prong. So we have mentorship for our new people, getting that peer support kind of relational thing. You have your official supervision, but I do think that that's a prong that I believe strongly in being necessary. That external coaching, that's the only way I view that you're going to get that really constructive, objective view in, where it's absent the personalities and all these things. So you have someone, an outside entity, consultant, or a consulting agency. So that's what I'm working on now. So I love how we've identified some tangible things that people can bring back to their agencies. I do want to be mindful of time because as I teased, I knew that we'd be able to talk on this for hours and hours. But I do want to ask you both, with all the conversations we've hit so many little topics and intersecting themes, what advice and what, I suppose, thoughts would you like to leave the listeners, recognizing that many of them are leaders, whether it's line level or emerging leaders that are going to be our lieutenant colonels and our assistant chiefs one day?
So one thing I talk about with people is the ABCs. It's our attitude, balance, and choices. And that was taught to me early on by a leader that I highly respected and led our organization for many, many years. But he was my captain at one point, and that's where that relational trust was built. And so I just would pay attention to how he would talk, how he would communicate, how he would interact with people, how he represented himself and represented the organization. And so the ABCs to me are what people should think about is that attitude. How are you showing up? How are you sitting in a briefing room and changing the energy in the room, right? So we started off talking about this toxic environment and culture. Well, take accountability for yourself and how can you shift or change that? Don't always expect somebody else to do that for you. And how can you speak up and lean in on things that you don't think should be talked about or do change the environment to being toxic? And attitude is a lot of things, but that's the A. And B is balance. It's balancing your priorities for yourself, right? Those integration of work-life balance, but it's balancing also what you need for yourself and what you need to do for yourself versus always waiting for someone else or the organization to do it for you, especially because we're talking in the context of leadership. Don't wait to be tapped. So balancing your priorities, what's good for you, but what you also need and you need to do. And then the choices is the action, right? It's making that decision to execute and actually do something. And the choices that are going to work well for you. And if you really want to have that deeper value and deeper meaning, then you have to be outside of yourself. And how does it contribute what you're doing to the organization so that it can also help those that you serve? So I talk about the ABCs. I think that's really important because who you are is how you're going to lead, and those ABCs will guide you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Jonni, and that's basically what I was going to talk about is setting the example every day in, day out, set the example. And I always talk about motivation versus self-discipline. And I think everybody who is successful is self-disciplined. And here's why. Because not the real world that you're going to wake up every day and be motivated. Sorry, that's called fantasy land. There's days you're going to wake up and you're not going to be motivated to do the things that you should do that day.
Mm-hmm.
If you have self-discipline, on those days, that self-discipline will make you do the things you should have done on those days that you weren't motivated. So I think, go every day, show up, do the right thing, set the example in everything you do. I know when I was a professor of military science running my ROTC program, somebody asked me one day, so what's your number one job? And I said, my number one job is every day make every one of these cadets want to be like me. Show them how a leader walks, talks, interacts with people, makes decisions, does those kinds of things. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the first step, because that's where that trust starts being built. And if you don't show up every day and do the right thing, then I don't want to be a part of your organization. I can tell you.
Yeah. It's that modeling, and I think that's the word that I'll use to sign a lot of what you both said, is that recognize what you do, you're signaling overtly or maybe subtly sometimes, but you're signaling what you want more of, right? Like what are our leaders doing officially is what we want all of our people to emulate, whether they should promote one day or whether they just keep doing their thing. So modeling the right things.
That's what the leaders should be doing.
Yes. So part of that is also, I mean, going back to ego. As a young sergeant, I've shared this, like I felt like I had to have all the answers, right? And I wanted that competence to breed confidence, and then I had to fake it till I made it. But where I really got comfortable was recognizing, like, no one expects me, or no one should be expecting me to know everything. My job is not to know everything. My job is to organize and coordinate and help people through and guide them and provide the framework so they can make more appropriate decisions, because they can't run everything by me. And most things you only, very few things do you have to decide right now in police work. And most everything you can actually mull it over and come up with a fantastic solution after a couple moments of bouncing ideas around. And so by doing that, then I'm inviting other people to do that.
You get out there and you see that what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
they're working,
The real world.
they're working hard. It's tough.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get removed from it and we're like, oh yeah, I remember back. And no, go out with them consistently and take a report or go on a call, and it's hot, it's raining, people are yelling at you,
it's different.
whatever, you get reminded what your people are actually experiencing out there, and not just the uniform, but go spend time, hanging out with the auto techs. They keep our fleet safe, right? So don't underestimate the value of every single person, dispatchers in our call center, the whole thing.
Great.
Yeah.
But I do have to jump off of here.
Absolutely.
Eric.
Well, thank you so much, Jonni. Yeah, and how to get a hold of Jonni will be in the show notes, as well as Oak. So thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Oak, great I hope we get to chat it up again soon.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys, take care.
All right, I'm really excited to share with you the new Blue Grit Police Testing and Hiring Guide that's live on the website. Really, this is the culmination of everything I've learned about police testing from the time I came in myself and had to figure out, trial by fire, what it was that agencies wanted. At the same time, how to showcase my best version of myself, right? It's not about being something that you're not, but it's about understanding each stage in the game so you can present the best way. In my guide, I go in everything about the hiring landscape right now, how to develop your mindset, what to expect, and how to show up. So it's about knowing yourself well, like identifying strengths, weaknesses, how to conceptualize this, how to articulate this, and then going into the test itself. So written, physical components, interviews, everything that we're looking for there, the background, what that entails, polygraph, psych eval, medical, what these things all are, what they're trying to yield or determine, and then how you can make sure that you are showing up to be effective so you're not wasting your time, stress, money, all the angst of waiting for this extremely long-term process to go through. So just show up the right way, your best way the first time. Again, you can find that at bluegritwellness.com. Go to the shop, so it's bluegritwellness.com/shop. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.